G'day and thanks for joining us for another Australia Talks. I'm DK and I'm joined as always by my lovely co-host Ardeet. Today is Thursday, the 27th of August 2026, and our topics this week are wild weather, rain, and an El Niño? What is going on? And Albanese to settle the AI data center energy rules. Of course, that one is probably going to change even before we've published this. Who knows? Of course, we've got our Two Dicks Town Talk, and then we'll jump into This Week in Australian History, and we'll finish off, as always, with the 4X Bottle Top Trivia. But before we get into all of that, we need a little favor from you all. If you enjoy the show, the best thing you can do to help us out is share it with a friend. We'd also be grateful for a review as well. This helps us grow the podcast and keeps us making the show that you love. Now, we will catch up on what's happened in the last week after Croc Watch.
Let there be 1,000 blossoms bloom as far as I'm concerned. But I ain't spending any time on it because in the meantime, every 3 months, a person is torn to pieces by a crocodile in North Queensland.
Most of us think of crocodiles as pure water and mud animals, so like fast in the water and dangerous on the banks. So the only way to escape is to climb a tree, right? No, wrong. You're going to die because crocodiles can climb trees. Now, despite that, it's not all as bad as it sounds, as we'll hear shortly. But just to make it clear, if you do get charged by a big saltwater crocodile, they're the freshwaters you don't have to worry about. I don't think they even charge you. They tend to run off. But if a salty is charging you, running in a zigzag pattern is a myth. It actually reduces your speed. There's things about, if you zigzag, they find it hard to turn. Nope. It reduces your speed and negates your natural advantage as a human. So crocs can get up to like 15k an hour, but it's in short bursts and they don't have the stamina to maintain that speed over long distances. So if you're fit, you can easily outrun a crocodile on land if you maintain a steady, straight course, and obviously adrenaline's going to be going, so you'll be putting some maximum distance between yourselves and that. So don't just follow your natural instinct and just bolt as fast as you can. Ignore the zigzag. It's a myth. So
I always felt like that was a myth. It did seem like, it wasn't really going to help you. I'm not really sure what the logic there was. Were you confusing it? Like, I don't.
Well, I thought the logic was that they had difficulty turning, so that slowed them down. All you're doing is just hobbling yourself. So maybe it's a myth put out by Big Croc. Crocs can climb trees. Now, lot like a goanna or a monkey. There was a 2014 study by researchers including Vladimir Dinets and Australia's own Adam Britton. They confirmed it across several species, and not just in Australia, but that's what we're concentrating on. That it's not like they've got special adaptations, like there's no sort of gripping toes or that. They've just got body strength, strong claws, and slow, deliberate movement. That they can work their way up steep banks and angled trunks and low branches. Seems to be a practical thing. They're saying that's more so that they can bask in the sun when good ground spots are limited, and also a bit of a surveying of their surroundings, so like for prey or for rivals or threats. They're usually pretty jumpy when they're up in the tree, and if they get approached, they'll often just drop straight into the water. So the reason we don't have to worry too much in Australia is that the best tree climber are the freshwater crocs, and then the smaller ones, especially ones under 1.5 meters, regularly climb into branches overhanging the water. Hatchlings are particularly good at it. Apparently, hatchlings can scale even like near vertical surfaces like brickwork, which is apparently why they can often escape farms. Bigger freshies, when they get on a bit of weight, don't don't tend to climb as well, but they can still do it. The salties, the saltwater crocs, they can do steep slopes and low-angled structures. I mean, their babies can do the good climbing, but the large ones, they can get up onto trunks or low trunks or logs, but it's rare for them to climb higher. So if you're up in the top end, or northern Queensland, you spot a croc up a tree, odds are it's a freshwater croc and a smaller one at that. So, as we said, climbing trees not escape plan, run like heck is, and not really a big concern. Just, if anything, it's probably a picture opportunity, so see if you can sneak up on it. I mean, just in case, like, don't sort of get so close that if it is a salty that you're going to annoy it and it's going to drop onto you and snap onto your head. But play it, be a little bit sensible. But it might just be a good pick, a good picture opportunity. So yeah, next time you're near a river with overhanging branches in croc country, it's worth looking up as well as looking down.
That is absolutely terrifying. I try not to spend too much time around crocs, but I would, to have to learn that you need to be afraid of them from above and below is unsettling, to say the least.
Yeah. Now look, I wouldn't even like to have a freshwater croc drop on me. Like not even an under meter one. That would not be my idea of fun.
Croc Watch.
All right, let's catch up on the last week. What have you been up to?
Well, actually, today, Mrs. Ardeet and myself, we went to it's an antiques place, or antiques, old vintage type of stuff called the Tyab Packing House down. Strangely enough, that's at Tyab, an old converted. I can't remember what they used to pack there, but it's great big, huge shed full of that type of those sorts of curios, and we ended up talking about how much stuff there is that it's precious and meaningful to us while we're alive, but when we're gone, its value to most other people changes, sometimes to basically zero. And look, that's not to get maudlin, but there's a lot of stuff they've got out there to remind you of that while you're in there. You look at a dinner service, or you look at things that were would have been decorations in a home or part of the home, or that was probably a grandpa's old radio, and it's good to see these things moving on. But it was just one of those things of thinking, it was just putting things into perspective. So it was more an observation rather than a curling up in the fetal position on the ground, bemoaning the fate that is life. So it was a conversation there. But while I was there, there's a place that also sells old currencies and that. So I just bought two of the old $1 bills and a $2 bill, just on the spur of the moment. They weren't collector items. They'd been in circulation and they weren't rare ones. And I just popped them in my wallet, and the bloke was surprised for a moment because he said, "Oh, do you want to put them in an envelope?" I said, "No, just chuck them in my wallet." I said, "But they're still legal tender, and I just wanted to have them." He said, "Oh yeah," he nodded, "Yeah, okay, I can understand that." So it's something that it's kind of fun. I like the idea of having a couple of the old notes in the wallet, and when the novelty wears off, I'll decide what to do with them. But it was just, I looked at them, I thought, God, it's been so long since I've had some of them. I know I'd kept some ages ago and I think given them away, or can't even remember what happened with them. So I thought, big enough, old enough. I can spend $10 on getting I can spend $10 on getting $4 just to amuse myself in the wallet. And also, there'll be some opportunity, I imagine, in the future to pull one out, and somebody thinking, "Why the hell have you got that in there?" So
yeah,
maybe
I
not.
I think there's still legal tender. Don't
they
quote
are.
me on this, but
No,
they
are still legal tender.
Yes, there you go.
That was my understanding, and I confirmed with him. So
it does feel like kind of a waste almost to use it to buy something.
I wouldn't.
But yeah. I've got a $1 note, a $2 note, and I think I've got an old 20 in my safe. They're just there, so I know where they are, not because they're particularly valuable, but they're neat. They're just cool to have. I've got some sort of exotic money. I wouldn't really say I'm a collector, but sometimes it's something you see and you just go, "Oh, that's kind of cool. I'll get that." A little bit of a snapshot of history. So that's fun.
There is there is a lot of history in something like a note. I mean, this was a historical thing for me, thinking, well, that was the first note after we'd gone decimal. It was something from my childhood that was so familiar that wouldn't have even been seen by a lot of people alive today. And in fact, having said I wouldn't spend it, I don't know what the situation would be, but if the situation's right, I would probably try and spend it just to see what happened. Now, I don't know what that situation might be, and it might be something that'll be just for my own, well, of course it'll be for my own amusement. That tends to be how I operate on these things. Because I think, well, now I know if I want to get another one, all I have to do is just pay a couple of bucks so I can get another one. But it'll depend whether the joke's worth $4.
Yeah. Absolutely. My sister works at a hotel, and many years ago, she did have an older gentleman that paid for it was just like minibar stuff with some old currency, and she was like, "I can't accept this. Like, this is this is collectible stuff," and he was just like, "It's fine. I've got heaps of it," and kind of left it at that. So she was very confused and perplexed, and I guess I am, and now all of you are too. So by any chance, if he is listening, some old fella that loves to run around giving out old currency for some reason, get in touch with us, because I want to know, like, why.
He might literally have a whole lot of it, because he might be one of those people who regularly chuck some under the mattress or bury it out in the backyard and thought, why not? It's still legal. It's worth the same. I can either give it to the bank or I can enjoy. Like, he probably gets a kick out of seeing things like your sister going, "What the hell's this?" Yeah.
No, you're 100% right. There are a lot of eccentric people out there, and I'm all for it. So, go out there and spend your old money.
What about you? What have you been up to?
I have been just really, really busy this week, and my wife says to me the other day, let's get a caravan just out of the blue, and I was like, I don't want one. Do you know how much they are? They're very expensive. And so we've been looking at campers, and I've gone down a whole rabbit hole now. So
actually get, not just hire one to go away.
Yeah, I did think about it. I was like, I'm sort of partially tempted to just hire one and just see if it sort of suits us, because the problem with when you go to buy a caravan is, of course, you want something as big as like you can afford, right? But then, of course, it's heavy, so then and I said, look, because there's 5 of us, we need a 3-stack bunks for the kids, and then that becomes, that puts us in a certain weight class, and then I'm sort of like, I don't think it's a good idea. So I'm not a huge fan. I also kind of like the idea of when we go camping, we're a little bit uncomfortable, In my mind, that is camping. I like to sleep in a swag. You're gonna get dirty. You're gonna be a bit gross. You're gonna be uncomfortable. That's kind of the point. My wife is no. She wants air conditioning. She wants a nice, comfy mattress. All of the nice things. And to be fair, she has roughed it for quite a few years. So,
fair enough.
Yeah, I can get it. So anyway, I think I'm going to end up spending my weekend looking at caravans and campers.
Well, see if you can.
There are a lot of options.
You can hire it or do one. My good mate, the professor that I've mentioned a couple of times from memory, and he'll correct me if I got this wrong when I see him next. I'm pretty sure he hired a caravan at least once or twice, so he got an idea about it. He certainly looked at a number of them, spoke to a number of places, and I think he might have even spoken to some other owners. I'm not sure of that one, but I'm pretty sure that he had hired a couple, and he ended up getting a really good one. But it got a lot of the stuff that he wanted. It also meant too, when his situation changed and he sold it, it was the type of van that somebody else who actually had a bit of knowledge is going to look at it and who looked at it and thought, oh, yeah, that's a good van. You've got all the right stuff in there. So, it's one of those things that if your situation changes, it can pay off as well. So, yeah, I mean, you got to work it out, but you can hire the things, even if it's hiring something that's, good enough, you're going to find out, well, how is it having yourself, the missus, the dog, and all the rugrats within one area?
Yeah, no, and you're right. I've definitely considered that. And I think what we'll do is we'll go and have a look. I've kind of got a short list of ideas, and there is a couple sort of within an hour's drive. So I think we might go have a look, but before we do make any sort of major choices, we'll sort of whittle it down. But yeah, look, I cannot believe the price of some of this stuff. Like it becomes very expensive very, very quickly. And then of course you need the vehicle to tow it, not just comfortably, but safely as well. And like I can see why
that's a whole new that's a whole other minefield as well. The towing weights and everything. I mean, you know that it's complicated, but it's surprising just what your vehicle can and can't tow. And then you also got to think too, if you're pushing it and something happens, you're always running the risk that your insurance is going to go, yeah, computer says no.
That's right. So you've got to, just because and the other thing is, just because it legally can doesn't mean it's that you should,
Good point.
And because like my ute can tow 3.5 tons, but that doesn't mean it's safe and I'm comfortable doing that. I have towed that in the past, and I don't want to do that again. It wasn't fun.
Okay.
You're really pushing things to the limit at that point. And my car's not stock either, so I've got upgraded suspension and things like that. So in theory, I've done the right things and all of that sort of stuff. So look, it's this balancing act, where you go, okay, where's the comfortable limit where I feel like we're safe and we can drive for a long period of time and all of that. And yeah, like you said, you can't overload things and all of that. So it's a whole thing. So if you've been through this and know the torture that I'm about to endeavor on, let me know if you've got any advice. Otherwise, let me give you a little bit of advice and explain why Australia's weather is seeing soaking rain while there is a record El Niño forming on the horizon. And El Niño is synonymous with drought here in Australia, but another rain band is lined up this week to soak everyone from WA all the way to the East Coast. Everyone basically is getting a good soak this week and into early next week. And if you're listening and thinking, hang on, it hasn't rained here yet, just wait. I promise it is coming. At least that's what the forecasts have said. Following multiple widespread soakings earlier this year, 2026 is on track to become Australia's wettest El Niño year on record so far. Considering its impacts on precipitation eases through spring and diminishes by summer, the country is therefore unlikely to face widespread prolonged drought. touch wood. Let's not jinx it, but hopefully we'll be okay. But while rainfall this year has been surprisingly abundant, temperatures are following a more traditional El Niño script, with spring and summer heat tipped to challenge all-time records. And I can tell you, winter is gone up here in Queensland. The heat is certainly beginning to come through. The year began with widespread rain through February and March, but considering a wet La Niña phase, the opposite of what we now find ourselves in, is active off the Pacific. That was no surprise. However, even following the rapid transition into El Niño through autumn and an intensification towards an unprecedented event in winter, frequent rain bands are still traversing Australia. As a result, year-to-date rainfall is at an all-time record for an El Niño year, with the national average this year already more than 400 millimetres. August rainfall is looking particularly impressive, especially for an El Niño year. Though 27 previous Pacific warm phases through the last 27 Pacific warm phases since 1900, I was thinking, that doesn't sound right. The nation's average August of rain has been a paltry 13 millimetres. But during the next 5 days, a mammoth cloud band will engulf the southern two-thirds of the country as a stream of tropical moisture arrives from the Indian Ocean. And for parts of South Australia, Victoria, and New South Wales, this system will ensure that it is one of the wettest Augusts on record. It is a reasonable call that winter rainfall predictions across Australia were a little bit off the mark. And we've talked about this before with these basically modelling just doesn't really work anymore with the climate crisis. The outlook that's been issued by the Bureau of Meteorology in late May heavily favoured a dry season. And I think we talked about this back in sort of April, May period, saying how we're going to have a really, really dry winter. And then, of course, it was incredibly wet. So why isn't 2026 playing by the rules when the Pacific warming, the heartbeat of El Niño, is on track to become the strongest on record? Well, firstly, not every event is the same. And I know that sounds super obvious, but of course we're modeling based on previous predictions. And of course there is always a natural variability in the weather just by its very nature. And history has proven that the strength of an El Niño is not proportional to its impacts on Australia. But despite this expected variability, a trend has emerged on how El Niño is affecting Australia. We are getting wetter, which, I don't know, sounds good to me. This is mostly an influence of climate change, which is causing Australia's annual average precipitation to steadily climb. However, this increase is enhanced in El Niño years, which opens up the possibility that climate change may be indirectly altering how El Niño affects Australia's weather patterns. Another key factor is not just the Pacific Ocean. It's also one of multiple influences on Australia's climate variability, of course. And one possibility that could be negating the El Niño this year is what's happening over on the west coast. The waters across the central Indian Ocean are currently simmering. During the last 16 moderate to strong events, Australia's winter rainfall has decreased by an average of 32% compared with neutral years. But that figure drops to 20% in spring and just 2% in summer. And since winter has not brought widespread droughts, the 2026 unprecedented El Niño may leave Australia relatively unscathed. Can
you just say that string of figures again for me, please? I've lost my concentration just as you you're saying that, those three. Sorry to interrupt, but it just sounded important.
So during the past 16 moderate to strong events, which is kind of a loose sort of variability, if I'm honest. But Australia's winter rainfall has decreased by an average of 32% compared with neutral years. A neutral year being a year where we don't have an El Niño or a La Niña. So there are times when neither is inactive. It's just kind of quote unquote normal. But that figure dropped to 20% in spring and just 2% in summer. And since winter has not brought on the widespread drought that was predicted, the 2026 unprecedented El Niño may leave Australia relatively unscathed. So we predicted...
So it's depending whether... Right, that's the bit where I missed that's got... Yeah, okay, sorry. Thanks for that recap. I missed the seasons. I couldn't work out why it was such a drastic reduction in numbers.
Yeah, so basically we predicted that we were going to have a really, really dry winter going into an absolutely scorching summer. And basically, that's not what's happened. And we don't really know why based on the modeling that we have for the past. But part of that could be what's going on in the Indian Ocean. It could also just be climate change. It could also just be we don't know anymore. Who knows what's going on? And the BOM's latest spring modelling is very confident that the western half of Australia is in for a very wet spring. So if you're in WA, get ready for that. The outlook is mixed, though, for eastern states, from near even odds of being wetter or drier in a lot of parts of Queensland and New South Wales to an 80% probability of below median rainfall in pockets of Victoria and Tasmania and little parts of southeast Queensland. So unfortunately, it does look like Melbourne particularly is going to get really, really dry. Southeast Queensland is going to get really, really dry, and parts of the east coast of New South Wales are going to get quite dry as well. That is the prediction. If you want to see some of the climate modelling and the predictions, of course, it's all in the show notes, but I think both you and I may end up having quite a dry next few months. But again, we'll see what happens. What is far more certain is that our mild winter is going to transition into a scorching spring and summer. And as I said, the heat has already hit up here. It's like winter just ended a week ago. Someone just turned off the AC, and a warmer than average summer, could be an understatement. The modelling is tipped that southern Australia is going to bake with the mean temperatures above 3 degrees above pre-industrial levels coming in the next few months. Thankfully, I don't live in southern Australia, so I should be fine up here dying in Queensland. So very hot. Possibly wet if you're in WA, possibly in other parts of the country as well. Basically, no one knows what's going on. Ardeet, how are you going to prepare?
Well, look, there's one thing I can say, complete certainty is we can't do anything about it. That's whether the predictions happen or the predictions don't happen, you can get out there and yell at the clouds or yell at the clear sky. It's going to do what it's going to do. For me, for preparation, DK, I'm probably got a careful checklist, a plan of all the things to be concerned about with these predictions, and it's basically a blank piece of paper. I'm not going to be doing anything different at all. There'll be, I suppose, to just jump straight to one of the serious points of it, because it can, if the predictions do happen, you don't want to be caught when they're happening. So if you're in an area where you have, where you got fire danger, well, you need to do your normal preparations, and possibly just a little bit extra. So the clearing, the cleaning out of the gutters, the making sure that your backup fire equipment, your generator, making sure that all those sorts of things are ready, your alternative source of water. Because the worst that's going to happen is they were wrong and you didn't need it. But you don't want to be in the middle of things and find out that they are needed. And if you're in an area that you have susceptibility to flooding, Yeah, and there's a number of places like that around Australia. Yeah, you might have to have your set bags for sandbags ready. You might even have to work out, know in advance where you're going to be getting your dirt from for that. You need to be making sure that your gutters, your water exits from the properties are all clean. So I think it is a good heads up to take a little bit of serious with it when you're in an area that's particularly susceptible. For me, I don't feel like I need to do anything more than what I do on an off year anyway. So yeah, that's the serious side. Again, to the cynical one, I cannot help but feel that this is another overhyped, once in a lifetime super El Niño, we're all going to die type of situation. I've got a high enough level of confidence in the people I listen to know that it's moving into an El Niño event, and that there's a possibility that it might be a decent size one. But it just has been, pumped up to the point where I hear it now and I think, you just, what's the word? You get when you're getting people used to something, you're essentially, anaesthetising themselves to these warnings. It becomes a little bit, boy cried wolf type of situation. That doesn't mean it is, but it does come across where it's you've got a sensational headline. Think, oh, great, a sensational headline just to get the clicks. And no, we really mean at this time it's really going to be terrible. So, look, we'll see whether my cynicism's warranted or not. But, all this alarm and dread, it annoys me, actually, to be perfectly honest, it bloody annoys me. I'd rather them say, it's happening, we've got a high level of confidence in that. There's a chance that it might be bigger than what we thought. And if it is, that's what we do. Whereas I don't know what it is in the bureaucracy. It's almost like they've been bitten in the past and hauled over the coals because they didn't warn people strongly enough, that now the pendulum has swung the other way, and it's when there's this slightest bit of increased risk, it's quick, get out there and ring all the bells, because if we're wrong, we can sort of say, oh, well, we really thought this. But if we're right, then people can't have a go at us. And unfortunately, I don't think that's a good information, a good method of presenting important information. So look, we'll see. Yeah, and it's a big country too. A lot of this is often presented, it's sort of talked about as if, Australia's one small homogenous mass. It's going to be very different for people all over the country. It's edge to edge and in the middle. So one of the big words about this for me main words for this is complicated. You can't just make blanket statements about this. And I don't even pretend to understand these weather patterns. But when you listen to somebody who does, and they're talking about it, and they're saying, yeah, we've got this with El Niño, and then we've got the Southern Oscillation Index. And then they start saying, but then we've also got, I don't know, there's something like an Indian Oscillation Index. And they said, but then there's also this other thing there that gets affected by. They start going to all these technicalities, and I think, so it's not actually as simple as what the headlines say. There's a whole lot of moving factors, and at the end of the day, it's just one big model based on probabilities, and probability is not certainty. So, as I said, don't have to be complacent. You do have to be ready as if it's going to be going that way. But I also think we're a long way off really having to be, in a panic about it. And unfortunately, media will know, and the bureaucrats know, that when you get the populace in a panic, they become more compliant They become better consumers of the information. They start looking towards you for solutions. So, yeah, that's my cynical side's thinking that. But look, we'll see. I may be eating my words. It may be worse than I think. I don't think that's going to be the case. So for me, not a hell of a lot of preparation, extra preparation. But for some people, it will be prudent. That's how I view it. What about you? How do you view it? And I didn't even get climate change. What's your opinion on how climate change may or may not be affecting it? And is there anything extra you're going to be doing?
So I guess for me, I'm going to start with the forecasting, because I do want to just temper what you said a little bit. I think you're being a little bit unfair to the Bureau, because a lot of the rhetoric we see around this doesn't come from them. It's the media that reports on it and goes, this is the world's ending El Niño, and they're calling it the super El Niño and all that. None of that is like a scientific term, right? It's just, it is more intense than we've seen in the past. But we're seeing that across the board with weather patterns these days. So that's not really too surprising in the grand scheme of things. But of course, the media hears this and goes, super El Nino, and just runs with it. And I think you're right. You do get this sort of fatigue of, everything's the biggest and worst. And sometimes that is true, but also we love to sensationalize everything these days, of course, because attention is the currency of the universe these days. And if you don't get eyeballs on things, then you don't get paid. So I sort of, it frustrates me as well. But I do wonder, I think it's very hard to kind of untangle the climate situation with this, because it very obviously is having an impact. The ocean water is a lot hotter than it has been in the past, and as a result, we're seeing an intensifying. It's just basically just more extremes, colder winters, wetter winters. Throw the models away, because what we've previously experienced clearly is not what's happening anymore. And we know how the weather systems are so complicated that we can very, very difficult to model appropriately. Like you said, it's a huge country. Trying to measure the atmosphere everywhere all the time in enough granularity to really give a proper prediction moving forward is it's not impossible, but we just don't have the resources really to do it. And as such, we have to go on, we think this, we've got probabilities and those sorts of things. But at the end of the day, sometimes something hasn't been accounted for in the model, or the model's incomplete because it's, you don't know what you don't know and all of that sort of stuff. And before you know it, what you've predicted is completely wrong. It's a bit of that butterfly effect, especially when it comes to weather. And so I do empathize a little bit with the Bureau as they're trying to. I feel like it would be much, much more difficult to be a meteorologist these days compared to in years past, where you're kind of like, we've seen this before, it does this. It's quite predictable. These days, it definitely feels like the predictions are almost opposite of what they say. If they say we're going to have a dry summer, maybe we'll have a really wet one. Who knows? There isn't a huge amount for me to do to prepare at my current house, but where we're moving to, I am a little bit concerned. There's a lot of loose leaf litter on the ground, so there's a potential for a bushfire risk there. There's also, we're on tank water and the tanks aren't full, so that may be something that I'm going to have to do. I may have to order water and things like that. So I am a little bit concerned going into an extremely hot summer with a sort of a changing living situation, but we'll prepare, we'll adapt, we'll make sure that things are ready. As of right now, everything's still quite wet and green up here. What I'm sort of worried about is how long this El Nino may go on for. So we may have because we've had a lot of rain, there's a lot of fuel in the system for bushfires, but it's not really dried out enough yet. In 3 more months, then it might become a real big problem. And we've seen this in previous years where we've had a lot of rain and then we've gone into, even if it's just 1 6-month period of dry, all of that growth has sort of died back, and then all it takes is a spark and boom, you're off. And that's what concerns me. So I think it's very prudent what you said about making sure you're prepared. Go and check if you've got water, if you've got like bottles of water, go and check them. Check, they expire. The bottles expire, not the water, and it will contaminate the water and won't make it safe to drink. So go and check that. Check your survival kit. Now's the time to do it before you need it. There's nothing worse than going to get something and finding out it doesn't work. The batteries are dead, or the water's expired, or whatever. So I think that's really, really prudent. And actually, over the weekend, I might actually go and do that as well, and just check, even just empty the water that's been sitting in there and just put some fresh water in, because I think it's about 2 years ago since I filled it up. So just stuff like that. Just get on top of it now. You may as well because you might not want to go outside in a couple of months. It might be that hot. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, look, I kind of I'm becoming very tired of living in unprecedented times. But anyway, this is another one, and it probably will be another record-breaking year, but we'll see what happens, because we don't really know. But if we do end up having wetter years, I'm interested to see how. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. If the Australian continent becomes wetter, this has happened many, many times in Earth's history, where for various reasons, the climate has changed in a local environment, and as such, it has become a desert, or gone from a desert into jungle, and so on and so forth. And a lot of Australia's outback at one point wasn't desert. So there is a possibility that some of these climate changes that we're seeing may begin to green the desert again, and things like that. So in a way, that's exciting, that potential. But I think it's going to be a lot of pain elsewhere for other people. So can't get too excited about that. So.
Yeah. Look, that's a fair comment that you made about the Bureau of Meteorology. So I'll take that tempering of my comments as intended.
All right, let's move on. It's now time for our Two Ticks Town Talk.
I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the desert, man.
All right, this week's Two Ticks Town Talk. We're going to the sunny and hot southern end of the Cape York Peninsula, up here in my beloved Queensland. We're going to explore the history and the culture and the flora and fauna of the Mount Bartle Frere, Queensland's highest mountain. That's right, this is a Two Ticks Mountain Talk. So Mount Bartle Frere is the highest mountain in Queensland, with an elevation of 1,622 meters, or 5,222 feet, which, as far as mountains go around the world, isn't very tall. But we don't have any other taller mountains in Queensland. Our land is very old, it's very withered, and as such, our mountains aren't very tall. But don't underestimate it, because it's got some pretty interesting features. It's approximately 50 kilometers or 32 miles south of the city of Cairns, and a short 25 k's or 16 miles from the town of Innisfail. The mountain itself was named after Sir Henry Bartle Frere, a British colonial administrator and then president of the Royal Geographical Society, and it was named by George Elphinstone Dalrymple in 1873. Interestingly, Bartle Frere was the British imperial administrator to India and Zambia, and then he was the British governor of Cape Colony during the outset of the Anglo-Zulu War in 1877. He also helped kick off the Boer War. So, in North Queensland, his name has been used for a couple of things. He has a base camp now named after him. He's also got a state school named after him, and there is a road named after him as well. But what I think is so interesting is he never came to Australia, or at least there is no record of him ever visiting Australia. So why is there things named after him? I think the things are named after the mountain more than him specifically.
Right, okay.
But like, why did we name the mountain after him? Well, we didn't. I didn't. It wasn't me. Can't blame me. But basically, we don't really know. The peak was named by Scottish explorer George Elphinstone Dalrymple. He just decided to name it after Sir Bartle Frere, and I think it was because. To put this nicely, to be quite generous to old George, he was quite the character. He was quite a staunch imperialist. He had a few expeditions in far north Queensland, but it sounds like he was he was quite the go-getter and very much was looking to sort of enrich himself. I'm trying to be really generous, but he didn't sound like a particularly nice guy. And he was very nasty to the local indigenous population. But basically, he did go into politics at one stage, and I think all of this culminates to he was kind of trying to curry favor for himself. Is sort of my, how we've seen this time and time again. It's like, oh no, I'll name it after this important person, and then maybe they'll, he wanted to get lands from the crown and a few things like that. So we'll grease the palm through accolades basically, and I found a thing and I'll name it after you, and then you tell that guy to give me that sort of shenanigans. So anyway, the mountain Bartle Frere forms part of the traditional lands of the Noongayan Bunda Najon people, known as the Cho Chi Chilim, the mountain. And it is their spiritual home, literally. They've lived in this area and maintained a close spiritual connection with the mountain and the mountain range, because it's not a single mountain. There's a couple in a row. And they've had a connection with this land for thousands of years, and they believe that this is where their spirits will return when they die. So when I say it is their spiritual home, it literally is their spiritual home. Right. And they will be reborn to walk the land once more and to watch over the rest of their people in the surrounding country. And traditionally, they moved seasonally around the mountainsides, and they hunted in certain areas, but very rarely did they actually go to the summit, because that was, naturally, it is the most sacred part of a mountain, and so they were sort of reluctant to go up there. However, several men did guide an explorer and prospector, Christy Palmerson, to the summit in October 1886, and it took them 2 days to climb to the summit. And Palmerston was what we believe to be the first European to get to the summit of the mountain. He's a bit of a character, and I may do a Tutix town talk on him as well. The mountain is what is now the Wurunuran National Park. And originally this was 31,970 hectares gazetted as a national park way back in 1921. And since then, various sections have been added, with the most recently the large Palmerston Forest Reserve. Yes, it's Christy Palmerston's namesake, which brought the total area of the national park today to 133,727,000 hectares, which is huge. So they've more than tripled the size since 1921, which is awesome. And it may continue to expand. We'll see. This is such a mouthful. Wurunuran National Park is in the Wet Tropics World Heritage Area. Proclaimed in 1988, the Wet Tropics World Heritage Area covers nearly 900,000 hectares. And this extends, it's sort of a loose collection of national parks, and it extends for about 450 k's between the northern town of Cooktown and Townsville up here in Queensland. And the vegetation is primarily tropical rainforest. And this does include some open eucalyptus and wetlands and mangroves and things like that as well. But broadly speaking, if you're thinking about tropical far north Queensland and the national parks up there, it almost certainly is part of the Wet Tropics World Heritage Area, which I'm really grateful for this national park to protect these incredible places because there's a lot of unique flora and fauna. And because of that, some of the plants and animals on Mount Bartle Ferry developed in isolation because they're cut off from other high altitude populations. There isn't any mountains this high anywhere outside of this area. Basically, you have to get down into the snowy mountains to find a mountain that's anywhere close to this sort of elevation. So as a result of that, we're talking, over 1,000 kilometers. Because of that, the flora and fauna in this area has been isolated in their high altitude population for so long.
So it's almost like a little island.
Basically, yeah. I think that's a really good way.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's a really good way of thinking about it. And then this has allowed a number of unique endemic species to evolve, including the Bartle Ferry cool skink and Wilkie's leatherboard. But we'll get into these.
Oh, good. Okay.
We'll get into these.
I just want to find out what sort of hat it wears.
We'll get into these a little bit into more detail in a minute. The best thing you can do when you visit the mountain is the Bartle Ferry Trail, basically. But I cannot stress this enough. Please be warned that the climb to the summit is quite steep in a lot of places, and it's well signposted, but it's not. There's no stairs. This is. You're not rock climbing, but you may have to sort of scramble up some rocks and things like that. And of course, you're up the side of a mountain. Sudden weather changes have been known to occur in the area quite frequently. The Queensland government very strongly recommends that only experienced and, as they call, extremely fit bushwalkers should attempt the trail. The ascent to the summit can be quite treacherous, and unfortunately, quite a few tourists have become lost, some for several days while climbing the mountain, and as a result, they've had to send out rescuers and helicopters and those sorts of things. Most people that do become lost basically become lost because they've planned poorly. They're not prepared for the changes in weather patterns and things like that. So be smart and prepare before you head off. This is an area of tropical rainforest. It's very, very common as you get up into the higher altitudes that you will suddenly find yourself in the clouds, which will come out of nowhere. So again, I cannot stress this enough. If you're going to go, be prepared.
And if you don't know what you're preparing for, then that's your answer. You shouldn't be climbing it.
Yeah, you're not prepared. This area of Queensland records several meters of rain per year, so it isn't unusual for the peak to be covered in clouds. And the best time to climb the mountain is during the dry season, which is April to October. This is when the weather, basically winter, and this is where the weather is cooler and the likelihood of rain, generally speaking, is lower, though not this year. And there are yellow markers placed reasonably clearly every kilometre along the trail. So the trail itself is also signposted and things like that. So you can know, how far you're going and things like that. But again, you need to be prepared. The trail covers altitudes from 100 meters to 1,611, passing through different kinds of rainforests. You get foothills supporting tall, large-leafed lowland rainforest, and then on the lower slopes, patches of cyclone-damaged scrub will occur. Of course, this is basically Cyclone Alley. High winds, particularly those associated with cyclones, break up the rainforest canopy, and this enables more light to penetrate, encouraging prolific vine growth and other sort of interesting flora. And unfortunately, Cyclone Larry, which was way back, was particularly damaging to this area, and they expect that its damage is going to be basically still visible even 2 decades later, which is today, because Cyclone Larry was back in 2006. But we've had other cyclonic events through, obviously, since then to now. And of course, once you get a weakened system, it kind of proliferates and so on and so forth. So, but once you're out of that area, what I'm saying is don't feel too sad for the mountain. It just encourages quite a variation in the flora as you're traveling up the mountain. With an increasing in altitude, the rainforest gradually changes, as well as differences in tree species. This includes a reduction in leaf size and lower, more even canopies. And on the peak above 1,400 meters, the forest has a low, dense canopy as a result of frequent high winds, which, if you think about it, makes sense. If you're up on top of the, right up there on the top of a mountain, you don't want to be a big, tall tree. You're just going to get whipped away by the high winds and probably die. So what do? You become short, fat, and squat. And I know some people like that too. As I said earlier, several plant and animal species are found only on the mountain range here, with one of them being the Bartle Fairy cool skink. And I'm not going to pronounce its scientific name because I will butcher it. And this was first discovered fairly recently in 1981. And it's only found above 1,400 meters among exposed granite boulders on the cloud-draped summit. And this animal is considered a temperate rainforest relict, and its closest living relatives are in temperate zones such as Tasmania, Southern Australia, and New Zealand. And it's an energetic and agile little skink, and it's generally seen during the day when its rainbow sheen catches the light. And at night, it retreats into cracks in the exposed granite boulders. So as you're climbing up, you'll almost definitely see them. There's a lot of them. And they're not found anywhere. And if you take one home, it will die. So don't do that. And like you said, it's basically an island. This is where they're found here, which is
plus
really
it's
cool.
a national park and it's illegal.
Oh, these are critically endangered. You cannot touch them at all, so do not think you can take them home. That was a joke. Wilkie's leatherwood is a shrub with a dense, round crown. It's about 3 to 4 meters tall, and it's the only known population that grows in a microphyll vine thicket amongst large granite boulders, and this is above 1,200 meters up near the top. And again, this is found in temperate rainforests when its closest living relatives are in Tasmania and the South American country of Chile. So this is very much a relict of a bygone area. I love that island comparison you made too, because it very much feels like the top of this mountain is basically an island. There's also the critically endangered Bellenden cur nursery frog, which is a mere 25 millimeters long, so 2.5 centimeters, about half an inch, and it's only found in the rainforest areas above 900 meters in altitude. And it has a brown or orange browny back and a smooth pale belly that sometimes has brown flecks, and you'll almost definitely hear its buzzing call as you're climbing, but you're unlikely to see this frog as it hides under forest leaf litter and those sorts of things. Intriguingly, the frog's tadpoles never swim in water. Instead, its eggs are laid under leaves and rocks where they fully develop and hatch into little frogs, because there generally isn't standing bodies of water at this altitude, or if they are, they're sort of like very isolated, small little puddles. There are no lakes at this altitude on the side of the mountain or anything like that. So it's very, very hard to find a reliable sort of nesting spot. So they just said, nah, we don't need that. We'll just lay our eggs. I'm sure that they're not the only frogs to do this, but I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah.
The mountain itself also lies in the Wurunan important bird area, which is identified by BirdLife International because it supports a large range of bird species endemic to Queensland's wet tropical area. And this area supports specifically, I'm not going to list all the birds because it's quite a big list, but there's one that I wanted to point out is that this area directly supports southern cassowaries, which are absolutely terrifying. It's probably the only animal I'm scared of in the bush. So be careful when you're climbing the mountain. There be dinosaurs out there, and they will not be pleased to see you. And they will see you before you see them. So cassowaries are pretty bloody scary. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just go and look them up. They're basically living dinosaurs. Now, when you get there, what can you stay? I can hear you saying, DK, I'm psyched. I cannot wait. I want to get out there and climb this mountain. But you said it takes several days. Good listening. Yes, generally, if you want to go from the base of the mountain all the way to the top, it generally takes you about a 2-day hike. Going at a reasonable pace. There are 4 different camping areas along the trail. From west to east, they're called Junction Camping Area, Western Summit Camping Area, Eastern Summit Camping Area, and Big Rock Camping Area. You I think, can figure out why they're called those things. We're very good at naming. The Bartle Ferry Trail Camping Area each have a maximum of 8 people per night per camp, with a maximum group size of 4 people. So it is something you need to pre-plan, and there are no facilities provided at all. So you've got to carry everything in, carry everything out. There's no rubbish facilities. There's no toilets. There's literally nothing. There are links in the show notes where you can organize permits and find out more information and all that kind of stuff. So if you want to do this, it's a very serious, proper hike. This is not some silly little day trip.
So that means people have to book in?
Have to book, you have to have permits, the whole lot. This is something you very much need to prepare for. You can't just show up on the day, I'm going to Cairns for a weekend. No. That's not this sort of thing. However, you can do one of the trails, one of the sections of the trail you can do as a bit of a day trip. There's a road up to where that starts, and again, all this information will be in the show notes. And that starts you at about 700 meters in altitude, and you can do that in about 3 or 4 hours, sort of the walk, and then back to the car park. So if you're going, I don't want to put you off if you are only going to Cairns for a week or something like that, and you're listening to this going, that sounds really, really good. I'd love to do something like that. You absolutely can, but just be aware that trail does continue beyond those signposted day tripping routes. And if you continue, you will be out there until it's dark for more than one night. So be prepared. Don't be silly. People have died on this trail. So, do respect it. Respect the country and all that kind of stuff. But get out there, see more of this beautiful country. Be prepared. This trail is going to take you several days to do the whole thing. If you do want to do the day trip, of course, do it, but make sure that you know where it ends and all that kind of stuff. I can assure you that I wish I could show you pictures as I'm talking about this, because it is some of the most beautiful country I've seen. Amazing waterfalls, just absolutely stunning views of the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park and the tablelands. It's absolutely incredible if you get there on a clear day. I would recommend going in winter. It is incredibly hot. It's a rainforest. It's super, super humid. Winter is definitely the best time to go. So get out there, get up to Cairns, get up to far north Queensland, have a look at some of the really special places we have in this country. So that's this week's 2 Ticks Mountain Tour on Queensland's highest mountain.
Oh, and look, it's a fun name, Bartle Ferry.
Yeah,
it does sound good. Yeah, I mean, I think he probably had named it for political advantage, but there's this outside chance he thought, that's a fun name, Bartle Ferry. I haven't, and as soon as you explained it, I thought, well, God, that should have been obvious. But you made the comment about the cyclone damaged flora. And I suppose I just had in my head, a cyclone comes along, there's some damage and then it just grows up. But the idea that, or like grows back again, but the idea that it persists hadn't occurred to me. It makes sense because, I mean, trees don't just magically spring up. So, yeah, that'd be interesting. That'd be hard going too if you didn't have a track.
Oh, like when the original guy. So actually, what I think is interesting, and I probably should have said this in the main chat, but part of the current trail was the original like Aboriginal trails. So the Queensland government basically went, well, there's already a trail here. Let's just like make it a bit more formal. And so for quite a significant, like several kilometre stretch of the current trail is some of the Indigenous trails from the Aboriginal community in the area, which I think is pretty cool. But yeah, a rough country. Like it's difficult. I think from base to summit, it's only like 15 kilometres. But of course, in that period of time, your elevation is over 1.5 kilometers, and of course, like it gets very steep at the top. Which I wonder if that was part of the reason that the Ngunnawal people were sort of reluctant. I understand the spiritual side of things as well, but I do wonder if that also stemmed from, well, after this height, it's much more difficult and for very little gain, So it's kind of like now, we don't really go up there. It's a spiritual place, and also like there's not really much up there, and you're wasting your time, and all that kind of stuff. So it's probably a little bit of both in there,
Probably. Oh, can we go to the top deck? Oh, no. Look, I'd love to take you up there, but that's very sort of spiritual. So yeah, we'll just go to here. That'll be fine. Oh, yeah. Well, you've got to combine with the customs.
No,
going back down, speaking to the other parents and saying, "Yep, we got away with it again."
No, that's 100% something that I would say to my kids. Sorry, kids, your grandfather's ghost's up there, and he's angry at you. All right, he's disappointed, so we're not going.
People are people. It doesn't matter how many tens of thousands of years you've been here. There's going to be a mum or a dad that's going to think, "Oh, I just can't be stuffed going up that peak."
No, for very little gain. I mean, it's beautiful. The view is amazing. And if you're one of these people that are like, you see a mountain, you want to climb a mountain, cannot recommend this enough. You're in one of the most beautiful parts of the country. So get out there and have a look at it. But I think most people are kind of content with a day trip, go through some of the rainforest. It is beautiful to walk through, look at some of the waterfalls, and then kind of, go back to the hotel for the night. But if you're compelled to do it, you can do it. Just make sure you're prepared and you've got all your permits and all that kind of stuff. You'll find everything you need in the show notes. All right, let's move on. The federal government is attempting to settle the AI data center energy rules. Now, before I even get into this, I'm just going to say most of what I'm going to say is now wrong because the government keeps on doing its thing, and I didn't get a chance to completely rewrite my script in the meantime. So bear with me, a little bit of a grain of salt. Things are moving as this is developing story. So the federal government expects to settle a new energy and water rules for its massive AI data centers at its national cabinet meeting, which was yesterday. And they didn't, spoiler alert. And this came despite Queensland opposition forcing it to create new laws that will override the defiant Queensland attitude. With Queensland Premier David Christofouli, he was sworn to stand his ground at the meeting, which he did, and the rules that would require data center projects to purchase their power from new renewable energy projects backed by gas so that the energy-hungry facilities did not create more demand that would push up power prices. The Queensland and Northern Territory governments say that they will not sign on to a standard that ties data centers to renewable projects at the exclusion of coal and gas. Energy Minister Chris Bowen had already flagged the federal government's intention to legislate so-called causa pays energy rules next year for big facilities, even if all states and territories signed on, allowing the Commonwealth government to overrule dissenters and prevent data center proponents from playing the states off each other. Last Sunday, Mr. Bowen said that the government would find an agreement with the states if it could and legislate to ride over the top of those who who opposed the federal government. This is a little bit of a Freudian slip there. Who failed the federal government. Mr. Bowen said, quote, "The Queensland government's made their views pretty clear. We disagree with them and we're proceeding without them. Queensland wants to make an open slather approach. Let data centers be data centers approach. We don't agree with that. We want data center investment in Australia, but we want it to be in the best interest of Australians. And we're not going to let Queensland run a race to the bottom, which would see energy bills go up, reliability go down, because they want data centers at any cost," end quote. Which sounds good in theory. But the federal coalition is questioning how the Albanese government intends to grant itself powers to override Queensland's energy rules, saying that doing so, could be unconstitutional. Shadow Energy Minister Dan Teran questioned, quote, "How is Chris Bowen going to nationalise this? What powers is he going to use? The fact now is he is going to use desperate measures, that probably unconstitutional measures, to try and force Queensland and the Northern Territory to take a particular course of action, and it is just absurd. He hasn't been clear on what he wants to use, how it looks like he is going to attempt to use the corporation's power, and what would bring with all types of legal uncertainty," end quote. I know that sounded a bit weird, like I'd missed some words, but that is literally the direct quote. The Queensland government says energy sources for data centers should remain technology agnostic. In a statement, Mr. Christofouli said his government would develop its own framework that ensured communities and local councils also had a say in data center proposals. And under Queensland's proposal, data centers would be required to provide a social impact assessment and a community benefit agreement with the relevant local council before lodging a development application, similar to reforms on how battery storage and solar farm projects were assessed in Queensland. Mr. Christofouli said data centre deals must be done with the backing of local council and communities. However, as this is the update, as of yesterday afternoon, state and territory leaders met to settle these standards, but instead they agreed to basically undertake further work. So the story is going to continue. But during this memeeting, interestingly,
I should insert a sound effect there, kicking a can down the road.
Basically, what I did think was really interesting was that they specifically made a carve out for Queensland. So Queenslanders will be going our own way using gas, coal, or renewables. There isn't a specific mandate there, at least at this point. The proposal, of course, hasn't been drafted yet and all of that kind of stuff. So, but basically, the federal government wants to wants data centers to bring their own energy supply to shield against what's happening in the US, which is sort of populist backlash to such facilities. Community resistance has mirrored construction in the US, where facilities have strained local electricity grids and caused anxiety in water-scarce communities. Dozens of US data center projects worth more than $100 billion have been blocked or delayed by local opposition just this year, according to US group Data Center Watch. Settling minimum standards for data centers would provide investors more certainty on what to expect when dealing with Australia. And while data center energy demands are expected to triple in the next 4 years, the government estimates investment plans announced over the past 3 years alone would be worth more than $100 billion to the Australian economy. So this is, not small fish. The federal government also hopes that the new rules will help get more renewable projects over the line. Many are struggling to reach a final investment. Sorry, many renewable projects are struggling to reach a final investment decision, despite the government underwriting them through the capacity investment scheme. And this is due to a lack of energy buyers willing to strike a power purchase agreement that would guarantee demand for the projects. You know, if you're building a gigawatt solar farm and you don't have anyone to buy that solar, you're probably not going to build it. At least 9 of the renewable projects announced under the capacity investment scheme have since been withdrawn, and most projects that have won underwriting support are yet to reach a final investment decision. So, this one is really messy on the details right now. It is a developing story, but broadly it appears that both sides of politics are looking for a system that does give community power. I think we've seen what's going on in the US and we don't want to emulate that here. And of course, you want certainty for the investors that are, you know, paying for these data centers to be built and the power to do so as well. But there's a lot in this. What do you think about this? And more importantly, would you mind if a data center was built in your community?
Look, this really annoys me a lot, that particularly Chris Bowen's thing with him saying the federal government would override states resisting the renewable rules using tough powers in the Australian Constitution. For me, this is typical behaviour of ideologues. So when your pet ideology can't stand on its own and self-evidently be the right choice, then they use threats and power of government to force it upon other people. Now, I'm not saying that Bowen is exactly like Stalin. However, ideologues starting off with this sort of approach through history certainly raise flags. Now, that's a little bit of hyperbole there, but when I read that bit of, if you don't comply what we're saying is our ideology, and I know he wraps it up in, you know, wonderful sounding figures and facts and gives that little smirk of his, but it is an ideology. I do find that frustrating and annoying, and I do think, well, God forbid that Queensland and Northern Territory decide what is and isn't acceptable for their state. I think something like that, it's well and truly up to them. Yeah, you might argue there might be some things that states do that affect places nationally. To me, this isn't one of them, and it was just, I don't know, it was simply insane that Albanese and Bowen in the Northern Territory, that Albanese and Bowen ever pushed back against the massive supply of energy in the form of gas right on the NT's doorstep and ready to go. And the thing that is just gets under my skin on this is, of course, renewables will continue being part of the energy mix, not just in the NT and Queensland, but elsewhere, because, I mean, they're cheap. They're cheap. They're a constantly evolving technology, and particularly solar. I mean,
dollar for dollar is the cheapest form of energy you can get.
Exactly. So you've got something there that you can sit down and you can say, this is how much it's going to cost you. This is how easy it is to put it up there. And it should be competitive just by virtue of the fact of what it is. So if something like gas is more competitive than in places the NT, well, go with the competitive side. I mean, mates of the podcast know that I overall, not completely, but overall am a big fan of the current AI race, just in terms of what I believe it's going to bring to humanity. I'm also a big supporter of it because it has become a defence issue. I think it's so closely tied to how warfare and self-defence of the nation has evolved, that to deny ourselves strong AI is just leaving a hole in our defence. And look, I've expressed my opinion on different aspects of the defence, usually in terms of my dislike of the Defence Force being used aggressively, like as an aggression force rather than a defence force. But when it comes to the Defence Force of Australia, this is just such an important part of it. And if we are relying on, and it doesn't even matter if it's a good ally like the US or even New Zealand. Yeah, I mean, Australia and New Zealand are tight, but I still wouldn't be happy with us getting the bulk of our AI from, a hydro-powered a field of AI data centres in New Zealand and having that link over there, because those links can be broken and those relationships can change. We have to have that sort of independence. And to me, there's a certain part of this that I think somehow the Albo or whoever replaced him has to basically nut up a little bit and say, look, we've got to have this to a large degree because it's important for not just for the economy of Australia, and it is important for the economy of Australia and the well-being and all the advances going to bring, but it's also important to have this in our defence arsenal. Exploring all these different forms of energy as well. I mean, we looked, again, mates of the podcast know that DK and I will often criticise the Chinese Communist Party, but you look at what China is doing with their energy supply, and one of the things we've never said is that they're dumb. The CCP are very cluey. Super smart. I mean, they're all over a lot of Western nations in certain sections, and they're pumping out the renewables. They're also pumping out the coal-powered stations. They're also forging ahead with nuclear. They're also they're doing all of that because they understand you want to be the next. You want to grow your economy. You want to have the benefits that brings. You want to have the security that brings. You've got to have all this energy. So if you have something like these data centers, they're going on gas, that is a perfect customer for someone building a large solar farm to say, well, I'm going to see if I can win that customer, and I'm going to win them by offering them, cheaper electricity or more reliable, or it's battery backed, whatever it happens to be. The entrepreneurs work these things out, because the thing that's getting missed here is those data centers. And I do agree, once they're built, they're not the greatest source of jobs, but they do give those other benefits. But they are a customer with a lot of money to spend, and that incentivizes people, provided they're allowed to compete, incentivizes people to say, how can I get a slice of those billions of dollars that are being pumped into the data center to get including once they're going? Because once they're up and running, they're not free. They're continually paying for this energy. So it's a nice, juicy pot of money to incentivize it for it. And if the solar or the wind or other renewables can't compete by the nature of what they are, well, then they shouldn't be in the race, and it should go to whoever can provide that. So that's probably one of my big problems with this. It's that government bloody sticking their nose in it and stifling the competition there. I think you should be allowed to have coal-fired power plants. That's my personal opinion there. However, I can see the argument of saying, oh, no, we don't want to go down that road. We've done that with coal, and you can have arguments for and things. So I can see how that might be something that they put their thumb on the scale a little bit on that side. But beyond that, nick off. Let the rest of it be sorted out. Would I like a data center in my community? It would depend on how big and where it is. And people will often say these things like, oh, well, would you live next to a nuclear thing? Would you live next to a data center? I wouldn't want to live right next to a solar farm. I wouldn't want to live right next to a wind farm. But I'd live within a reasonable distance because I understand the technology. And I think, well, if I'm living at a distance where I can't be affected by the sound of the wind turbines, yeah, no issue. If I'm living at a distance where I'm not having the big, open, glary, to me, a bit unpleasant looking, even though it's sort of groovy, just how much energy it produces from the sun, and all that high voltage. So long as I wasn't within the area that I was uncomfortable with, yep, sure, I'd have it with it. So in a data center, if I had one in the community that didn't particularly impact me, I'd be happy to have it in the community. There is, the other side of the coin, which I think people are entitled to do, is there is a offering of, land and power and permitting and that to bring a data center in. So I think the community does have a say to a certain degree. And I think the pressure that we're seeing exerted on data centers, particularly the AI ones, of, no, you've got to do something about this energy up front. You can't just be taking from the grid. You can bring it in, ideally provide some extra. You can't be doing anything excessive with the water. I think the community is perfectly entitled to say what they do and don't want there. Same way they're perfectly entitled to say what they want with turbines and power lines. So I'm not completely oblivious to that. I think that is within the rights of the community. And even as Christopher Lewis stating out there, these data centers still have to provide a certain number of guarantees and go through a checklist process. They're not just saying, yeah, build whatever you want and, use it however you want. There is a process there. And I tend to agree with that as a principle. So that's how I feel about DK. What do you think about what the government's doing, and what would be your opinion on living near a data center?
Let's start there. Would I want to live near a data center? So, yes and no. If it was right next door, they do make a lot of noise, and I think the noise is the one thing that would bother me. So right next door, probably not. But if there was one sort of down the road, I don't really see why it would be any different than, saying, having like a shopping center or something like that. I don't think it would really interrupt my daily routine or anything like that. It's not like a pig farm where you're going to smell it from miles and miles away. And, I definitely think there is some more obnoxious, horrible sort of facilities, industrial sort of facilities that you can be saddled with. I think where the problem with the data center issue is, because data centers have been around a long time. It's not new. It's just that the amount and proliferation of the build out is suddenly everyone's scrambling to look for land for data centers and everything like that. The companies that are vying for the AI dominance, because if we fast forward, say it could be even 2 years, but let's say 5 years, there will probably only be a handful of the AI companies, like we've seen with mobile phones, like we've seen with social media, all these new technologies. There's a million fish at the start, and then very quickly they whittles down to a handful. And I think we're starting to see that now, but everyone's scrambling right now to try and be the king, right? And as a result, way more infrastructure is being built than we're probably going to need long term. And part of that is, I think communities shouldn't suffer as a result of infrastructure being built around them. They should benefit from infrastructure being built around them, realistically speaking. Of course, that's not always the case. You have to build dams in certain areas, which can, of course, destroy communities depending if they're within the dam's catchment area and things like that. Or we've seen that before where towns have to be evacuated, so on and so forth. That stuff's always going to happen. But there's no real need, especially in a country like Australia, for a data center to be built in a residential area. There's no reason that a data center should be built on top of, in Sydney CBD or something like that. I mean, you could put them in an office building, and I'm sure they're potentially looking at those sort of options as well. But the reality is I think in Australia, a lot of data centers will be built in more remote areas just because the land is a hell of a lot cheaper. Because let's remember, Australian land is very expensive, especially urban land, some of the most expensive in the world. And we have an abundance of space, cheaper land outside of the city areas, and massive solar opportunities, which again needs a lot of land. But if you're outside of the city, why not? I know one of the big data center proposals in Queensland is out in the Darling Downs in the gas fields themselves, so that it can literally just tap into the existing resources that are there. They don't need to truck it in. They don't need to do anything. They're literally just going to pump it straight from the ground straight into the data center to fuel the thing, I assume through a gas turbine or something of that nature, to power the facility. So that makes sense. And the government, I think that's why the Queensland government's kind of like, we've got some proposals of doing things like this. We've already got one very clearly like on the books. This is what they want to do. They've already purchased the land. Like, things are moving. So for the government, the federal government, to walk in and go, no, you can't do that. One, it is unconstitutional. They can't do that. There's a division of powers when it comes to the state governments and the federal government. And the federal government doesn't have the power to do this. So they're going to have to make up some new rules to try and get around this, and I just don't see that happening. And as we've seen yesterday afternoon, that they're going to have a carve-out for Queensland in this case, because I think they've quickly realised that they basically can't. You can threaten them, but there's nothing you can actually legislate that's going to make them comply. And I don't think, I guess a bit like yourself, I think at the end of the day, I don't necessarily know that, I think the money will flow into proposals that make sense. And right now, for the vast majority of these projects, not even in Australia, like even in the US, a lot of them are being powered by solar because it's just cheaper. Like it literally is just the cheapest way to do it. But they're looking at anything they can get. What's around? Is there coal around? Is there gas around? Is there nuclear around? Is there solar around? How can we power these facilities? Because they need a huge amount of power. One thing that concerns me is the cooling situation. And now we've heard this, that they guzzle a lot of water and things like that. That's generally the case if there is an abundant water supply, because it's a lot cheaper than other cooling technologies. So you can build data centers out in the outback, use huge solar arrays to power them, and have them air conditioned and not consuming water. So there are options and things like that. So I'm not super concerned in that way. I think the environmental regulations that we have here in Australia are such that for once in my life, I'm confident that the government should protect our communities from the negative influences of this data center rollout. And hopefully, look, I don't really think data centers as a business is going to be hugely beneficial to the community that is in that it doesn't provide a lot of jobs. The jobs that it does provide are quite good jobs, but per facility, you might only have 10 or 20 people that work there long term.
That's the reality.
But of course, there is the build out and stuff like that as well. So, but if we're getting highly skilled electrical engineers and things like that into remote communities, I don't see that as necessarily a bad thing. So, but I do, like everything, there's a balance we need to strive for. That balance being the benefit to the community, powering themselves plus. So let's actually feed more power back into the grid. This is what we can do. There's no reason that the community should suffer because something like this was built in that community. Period. And I think that's where smart regulation needs to be like, no. We'll help you build this facility. We'll give you tax breaks or whatever they need to do. But you need to provide stability for the grid. You need to provide surplus power, so what you consume plus more for multiple reasons. One, so that you can expand in the future, hopefully, and two, so that the community actually benefits from you being here as well. You are coming into a community you need to benefit that community. You can't just come in, use everything and then, well, you're not going to piss off, but who knows what's going to happen in the future with the AI stuff. So yeah, I think there's got to be some smart regulation here, but ultimately, do I fear the data center rollout here in Australia? No, because our capitalistic system is quite different to the US, and we do like to regulate for the benefits of everyone. It's that fair go stuff, right? Which I don't think, having lived in the US, that is not a thing. It's more like I've got the money, I can do what I want. So anyway. All right, let's move on. It's time for This Week in Australian History.
Right, this week in Australian history, we're covering 21st to the 27th of August. On August 21st in 1842, Hobart was proclaimed a city. In 1943, Enid Lyons and Dorothy Tangnay are the first Australian women elected to the Australian House of Representatives and Senate, respectively. 1984, the federal budget is televised for the first time. August 22nd, in 1770, Captain James Cook claims the east coast of New Holland in the name of King George III, naming the site Possession Island off the tip of Cape York, and formally claimed the east coast of Australia for Britain, naming it New South Wales. 1872, the 3,200 kilometre long Australian overland telegraph line is completed. So it connected to Australia to the global telegraph network via undersea cables. And unsurprisingly, revolutionised communications between Australia and the rest of the world. 1930, the two spans of the Sydney Harbour Bridge are successfully joined. It was a major engineering milestone, and still impressive to me that with something that size they could get that so exact. But that's what engineers do.
That's it.
Yeah. 1985, a Royal Commission found there was no link between chemical defoliant Agent Orange and health problems of Vietnam War veterans. And if the government says so, well, it must be so. They wouldn't lie to us about something so serious that would incriminate them and leave them open to all sorts of actions at all. Yeah. Bullshit.
I believe this has kind of, in the early 2000s, I think that was changed, but initially that was how it was.
Yes. Sorry, that's a good little rider to put in there. There's been some changes there, but it doesn't change the fact that they went through the charade of proving, in inverted commas, that it had nothing to do with their health problems. And remember, they're the same kind of people who are still in charge now. But anyway, 1895, bushranger James Alpin McPherson, known as the Wild Scotchman, dies in 53 after an active criminal career. Sorry, dies aged 53 after an active criminal career. 1966, led by spokesman Vincent Langiari, the Gurindji workers and families walked off Wave Hill and began their 7-year strike. So it was a protest against poor wages and conditions and evolved into a landmark land rights struggle. Can't remember if we've done Wave Hill as a Two Ticks Town Talk.
I don't think we do, but you've inspired me to.
Okay, well, in the same way as I was inspired to do John Friedrich last week in the second part of Pukaja, I'll let you note that one down because you said the.
I did mention it.
I said to Mrs. Ardeet that DK said, I can almost hear you writing that down. So see what you can dig up on that. 1989, Australia's 1,645 domestic airline pilots resign over an airline's move to sack and sue them over a dispute. August 24th, 2001, the Tampa crisis begins when the MV Tampa tries to help a boatload of refugees, mainly from Afghanistan. They rescued hundreds of asylum seekers and sought to bring them back to Australia, but it triggered a major political and diplomatic crisis over border protection policy. So it's a whole big story there, which...
Huge story.
Yeah.
And it's the 25th anniversary, so it's been in the news again.
Yeah, of course. August 25th, 1824, the Legislative Council of New South Wales sits for the first time. 1903, the Judiciary Act 1903 receives royal assent, creating the High Court of Australia. August 26, 2005, the inaugural A-League National Football Soccer season begins. So that was Australia's new national professional soccer competition, which seems to have been going quite successfully. Not a big A-League person, but got nephews and that who are into it, and it seems to have fitted into the international football psyche quite well. August 27th, 1870, John Forrest arrives in Adelaide from Perth after leading an expedition along the south coast via the Great Australian Bight. So he completed a major expedition across the Nullarbor region, enhancing knowledge of the country between Western Australia and South Australia. He also later became Premier of Western Australia and a federal minister. And I suspect that after all that dry walking, there was one or two tipples taken by the expedition that night.
Well, if there wasn't, I'm sure they would want to have.
By gum, this week's quiz is on eucalypts. So, let's see how
no, my
eucalyptus...
weakness.
Yeah, my floral kryptonite. A bit of a mix. Look, I'm not quite sure. You always go okay. You always go better than me at these things. But we'll see how we go on this. I reckon you'll go okay, and a couple might stump you.
I have a miraculous ability to recall just the most random stuff.
Yeah, I know.
You put me in an exam condition and I melt like butter. So.
Oh, luckily we're amongst friends. Okay, number one. Most eucalypts are Australian icons, but a handful of species are native outside the continent. There's a couple of countries and continents where eucalypts grow naturally. See if you can name one of them.
Okay, so I know they grow here, but I think they were introduced to I don't know if it's to the US.
These grow naturally, so not introduced.
So I know they're in the US. I know they're in California. I've seen them there, but I'm pretty sure they were introduced from the gold rush and taken over there.
Yep.
The one place I'm pretty sure that they grow naturally, and it blew my mind, and this was, unfortunately, I recall this, at least if I'm remembering correctly, because of a massive bushfire season that was happening a few years ago in Greece. And part of the problem was that they have a lot of gum trees. And I was like, did they introduce them there too? But I believe they grow there naturally, or at least that's what I read at the time. So I'm not really sure. No?
That's not what I've got here. I checked a couple of things down there and didn't see Greece. So if you're one of our Greek mates of the podcast and have alternative information, so no, not Greece as far as I'm aware.
Okay. I might be wrong. I might have misread that. Maybe it wasn't Greece.
Or I'm going to learn something next time. So
yeah. Or maybe they have their own name for a gum tree and they're like, it's the gum trees, but it's not eucalyptus, if you know what I mean.
No, I don't think so.
I'm trying to think what Australia was connected to in the past.
Oh, I like where you're going, but no.
Oh, really?
No,
It's like,
I know.
must be South America somewhere, maybe?
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, so no, would have been my guess if I didn't actually have the answer in front of me too.
My other guess would be Papua New Guinea because it's right there.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, New Guinea, Philippines, and Indonesia.
Ah.
And there's one that's called the rainbow gum, Eucalyptus deglupta, which looks literally like it's got well, not literally. It's got multicolored strands on it, which apparently when the bark ages, it changes colors. It goes from green when it's freshly exposed and then just ages through the hues of, yellows and
I have seen pictures of them.
Yeah,
Yes.
Beautiful tree.
Yes, I have seen that.
Yeah, it's a ripper.
Now, I've just looked it up because I was like, I was sure I read that.
On the Greece, yeah? What'd you find?
I was like, I'm sure that was right. They are in Greece, but they were introduced in the 19th century to help with, to eradicate malaria, which is interesting.
To suck up the water.
Yeah, so they were introduced there just like in the US, and now it's a huge problem and they keep catching on fire. So sorry, Greeks, we love you, but have this plant. It's really good for certain things. It catches on fire as well. What was that? Nothing. You'll figure it out.
Yeah. So what did he say? All right, question 2. What metal have scientists found eucalypts can pull up from the soil and deposit in their leaves and branches?
Oh, I feel like I should know this one. Damn it. My gut wants to say iron, but I feel like that's just because when I see them, like we've got a lot of what are they called?
Ironbarks,
streaky gums and ironbarks around, which have that sort of like tanniny, browny, rusty color, like you see with the red dirt and stuff like that.
Yep.
So I think that's where my mind's going, but I'll say that. Lock it in because I don't know.
No, it's not iron. It's a bit heavier.
Lead? That's too heavy?
No, it's heavier than that too, I think, if I'm remembering the periodic table correctly. One more guess. And it's one of those things that comes up so often when we're talking about Australia, particularly in the Two Ticks Town Talk.
It's gold?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So trees growing over gold-rich grounds in places like Kalgoorlie leave detectable traces in the foliage. It's too small to mind, but it is often enough to hint at hidden deposits.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And finally, question 3. This one I bet you get, or close enough. The Blue Mountains get their famous blue haze from a chemical reaction in the air. What compound, released in large amounts by eucalypts, drives most of that haze?
Ooh, because the Blue Mountains, it's interesting. You go, like, why are they called that? And then if you go there, particularly in the early morning, you can see it.
Yeah, you think, okay, I get it. That's a good name.
Again, we're really good at naming things.
Although I did notice down there, they originally tried to name it the Carmarthen Hills or Lansdowne Hills by Arthur Phillip, but because of that, people said, nah, stuff that, they're the Blue Mountains.
There you go. So my first thinking is it's some sort of like aerosol or something like that, right? We know that trees perspire constantly. It's one of the reasons why it's cooler under a tree is because the tree is like sweating on you. Like that sounds gross, but yeah, for lack of a better term. Ew. I'm wondering if it's blue because it's something that they're releasing in that process. And the only thing I can think of is like, is it like they're, the like the eucalyptus oil, like you get some leaves, you break them, it smells like, is that what they're releasing? Or something like that?
The thing that does it is apparently there's a thing called isoprene, ISOPRENE, and that's one of the that they pump that out in huge quantities with their eucalyptus oil. So yes, so the interaction of the sunlight with the eucalyptus oil, specifically the isoprene and a couple of the other volatile organic compounds that have been released, create that blue haze. So yeah, they send out those microscopic oil droplets into the air that combines with dust particles and water vapors and causes light scattering, and then you go into those incredibly complex things which I don't even pretend to understand, into that area of physics. And looking this up, I think, I'll try and look a bit more into this isoprene, and then quickly got lost. But
it happens, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's the most abundant hydrocarbon measurable in the breath of humans. So yeah, we apparently produce about 17 milligrams a day for a person weighing 70 kilograms.
There you go. I'm letting things go that I didn't even know.
Yeah, exactly. So there you go.
Yeah. And on that of letting people go that I don't even know, thank you so much for listening to another Australia Talks. If you have any feedback or suggestions for topics, please get in touch with us on our email at australiatalks@proton.me. We'd also be grateful if you could subscribe and give us an honest review, as this helps us out immensely. But as I said at the beginning, the best thing you can do to support the show is just share it with a friend that you think might enjoy it as well. Otherwise, join us next week for another episode of Australia Talks. As always, thanks for listening, and don't forget to tell your mum I love her.
Thank you, DK.